I caught my cheating wife with my father and brother and exacted the ultimate revenge on them all. Before they noticed me, I managed to take 7 photographs. David jumped out of bed and demanded, "Give me that camera!" In response, I reached behind me and pulled out the object hidden into my jeans. He stopped, scoffed, and challenged, "You do not have the guts." The next second, he slumped on the floor screaming. "My God!" my father exclaimed. "You did this to your own brother." I said coldly, "The only reason you're staying here is that I'd rather let Mom have the pleasure of caring for you herself." Sonia, my wife of 9 years, was crying. "Please don't end me. I am begging." I ignored her and told my father I'm not sure what makes me angry. "Are you cheating on my wife or doing things with her that she would never allow me to do?" "I am resigning. You will need to replace the building sign from Dawson and Sons to Dawson and Son. Actually, if that a-hole dies, it may only be Dawson. I don't see anyone running to contact an emergency to assist him." As I started to go, he inquired where I was going. "I'm heading to your house to show Mom the photos." "Hold on. We need to talk." "You may need to speak, but I don't want to hear it." He yelled, "Bobby, don't walk away. Talk to me." I ignored him as I proceeded towards my car. I punctured his car's right front and back tires. I didn't want him to rush to get to Mom before me. I drove 2 blocks, then stopped over to phone my mother. I'd have loved to give her the images in person, but with David in an emergency, the cops would most likely arrive at my parents' house when she picked up. I told her I was sending her some images she needed to view before Dad arrived home. She had some inquiries, so I said I'd call her back later. I checked my watch and realized I had about an hour until the bank closed. As I drove there, I considered what had just happened. I'd returned from a business trip a day early and saw my father's automobile in my driveway. I didn't think much of it at first because I'd always asked him to check in on Sonia while I was gone to make sure she was well and if she needed anything. Of course, when I suggested she could need something, I didn't mean it this way. Anyway, as soon as I stepped through the front door, the ruckus from the bedroom revealed what was going on. I went into the den, pulled the lockbox from the bottom drawer of my desk, unlocked it, removed the Colt, and slipped it under my belt just in case. I took out my phone, turned on the camera, and went into the bedroom. Sonia was kneeling with David, and my father was standing behind them. That's when I learned why I was usually the one sent out of town, while David remained at home. After I got to the bank, I emptied the dollar accounts and cashed out the 6 certificates of deposit from the safe deposit box. By the time I departed, I had somewhat more than $118,000. I immediately proceeded to the bank that handled the company's accounts and withdrew $155,000. I called it severance pay, although some may call it embezzlement. But honestly, I wasn't concerned about embezzlement because I was probably already wanted for assault with a tool. Before leaving town, I called David's wife, Cindy. I caught her just as she was ready to head to the hospital to see David. As soon as she recognized my voice, she asked, "Bob, what is going on? Your father just called and asked what you had done to Dave." I said that I returned from a business trip and found him in bed with Sonia. I snapped some photos, and when he tried to take the camera from me, I shot him in the leg. "I'm sending the images to your email. I am sorry you had to find out this way, but I thought you should know. Take care. Cindy." Bye. After hanging up, I drove past the city limit sign and continued west for about 5 miles. I pulled over and parked to avoid being tracked. I took the battery from my phone. I considered throwing away the phone, but opted to keep it to protect the images. I intended to get a disposable phone later. I then continued driving, attempting to put as much space between myself and Michigan as possible. After 2 days of driving, I arrived in Colorado. I booked into a motel just outside Denver and chose to call it home, using the track phone I had purchased at a Walmart in Kansas. My father, presuming he was still alive, would be at work by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My mom responded after 3 rings or, "Hello." "Hey, Mom. Bob, where are you?" I decided to be elusive because the cops were most likely looking for me. So I said on the way to New York, "Why on earth are you going to New York?" "I'm just trying to keep as much distance as possible between myself, Sonia, David, and Dad." "Did you really need to do that, David? He'll never walk fully again. He's lucky I didn't kill him." Cindy, I thought, deserved to be satisfied. She did not kill him, but she did toss him out of their house. Sending those photos was brutal. It was not severe. I felt she should know what kind of man she was married to. "I mailed them to you for the same reason. That was a waste of your time. I already knew he was a jerk. I knew he'd cheated. Sometimes, but I put up with it to keep my family together. But Sonia, I could not ignore it. I kicked him out and met with a lawyer the next day to begin the divorce proceedings. You should come back. I'm going to end up owning the business, and I'll need your aid to run it." "Why do you suppose the business was started with money I inherited from my father? My lawyer believes I'll get 60 to 65% giving me control. I'll need your help. Are you going to preserve the name Dawson and Sons or alter it to Dawson and Son with me as the son?" "Don't behave like that, Bob. Dave is my son just as you are. If he's present, I won't be. I can't be around him without wanting to hurt him. You should call Sonia. She needs to talk to you. I don't want to speak with her, so I'll skip it. You may as well get used to the concept. Divorce is frequently accompanied with counseling, and you will need to speak with her at that time." "What about the divorce?" "I've just left her. I will not spend money on a lawyer. She will eventually want to be single again so that she can handle and pay for the divorce on her own." "Bob, do you really have to offend her like that?" "Why not? That is what she is. What do you call a married woman who is intimate with two men on the bed her husband purchased? I thought 403 was very tame. I just called to let you know I am fine, and I will try to check in once a week. I'll talk to you later. Love you. Bye." I did not hear anything regarding the $15,000. I withdrew from the company accounts, so I assumed they hadn't detected it yet. I spent a week in Denver getting to know the neighborhood. It was pleasant, and I felt a pull toward the mountains, but I concluded it was too early to settle down. I needed to keep moving to make it difficult for them to find me. I stopped in Castle Rock and had lunch at Trophy. While I was there, I tried contacting Mom to let her know I was fine, but there was no answer. On a whim, I called the business. "Good morning. Thank you for calling Dawson and Sons. How can I help you?" "Morning, Glenda. Is my mother around? Bobby, where are you? Everything is falling apart here. You should come back." "Not going to happen. Is Mom there?" "I will transfer you, Bob." "Morning, Mom. How about New York?" "New York is behind me. I didn't enjoy it much. My current location is Dawson, Georgia. I'm eating breakfast at a quaint restaurant called Town and Country. I'm genuinely considering about settling here. You need to return home." "I do not think so. I need time to recover from what happened. If I returned now, I could wind up hurting Dad and Dave if I had to be around them. I need some time before I even think about returning. Could you at least phone Sonia and speak to her? I'm very worried about her. She's in a mess right now. She caused this problem herself. She can handle it on her own. I am serious." "Bob, I'm frightened she'll do something to harm herself." "Like what?" "It ends on its own. I would not rule it out. From my perspective, it might be faster and less expensive than a divorce." "That's rather cruel." "Harsh? Imagine arriving home from a business trip to find your wife in bed with two men doing things she would never do with you. She was lucky I didn't kill her after what I did to David. She is dead to me, and I would appreciate it if you never mentioned her again." I did not race. "Mom, have you forgotten who the two men were? I will call you later." I hung up the phone and nearly threw it against the wall. I couldn't believe she was still pressuring me to deal with Sonia after everything that had transpired. I left Castle Rock and traveled south on Interstate 25. I didn't have a specific goal in mind, but I felt just driving would suffice for now. Around 2 p.m., I stopped at a truck stop to get gas and eat. After filling up, I parked toward the rear of the lot just as I was going to get out. I heard a tap on the window. I looked over and noticed a young woman standing there. I pulled down the window and inquired, "What is up?" She glanced around nervously and refused to meet my gaze. She seemed to be fighting to muster the bravery to speak. As I examined her, I realized she was pretty attractive, probably in her early 20s. Finally, she found her words and stated, "This is extremely difficult for me, but I am starving. I haven't eaten in 2 days, and I am in pain. I will give you a BJ for $20 so that I can get some food." She was clearly not a professional because she simply asked for $20. I began to roll up the window, noticing her disappointment, but then got out of the car and asked her inside for a meal. Her name was Maggie Tallman. We did not say anything until we were seated in a booth. I asked her why she was attempting to obtain a meal. Maggie placed an order for a burger and fries before the waitress arrived. I suggested we both have the 8-ounce sirloin dinner instead, thinking it would be more satisfying. Maggie reluctantly told her story. She was fleeing from her abusive stepfather and alcoholic mother. Her stepfather had threatened her, and her mother was too intoxicated or high to notice. She stole all of the money from their wallets one night and fled. She had planned to travel to Houston, where her sister lived, but fell asleep on the bus to Denver. When she awoke, her purse had disappeared, leaving her stranded. She added that her stepfather did not follow through on his threats to avoid arrest for having that with a child. Maggie had barely turned 18 when she departed. She had threatened to call the cops, but her stepfather chuckled, saying it would be a, he said, she said, situation in which her mother would side with him to continue obtaining drugs. She did not want to take the chance. Our meals arrived and we ate peacefully. Maggie skipped dessert, eager to get back to hitching. I chose to help her because I was driving aimlessly to avoid my own difficulties. After paying, we climbed inside the car. She cautiously acknowledged that she had never done this before. I told her that I would not take advantage and offered her a trip to Houston. We traveled till 8 o'clock and then stopped for petrol and food. While waiting, I inquired as to whether her sister was aware of her impending arrival. Maggie's phone had been stolen along with her handbag, so she had not contacted her. I offered her my phone so she could call her sister while respecting her privacy. When I returned, our meals had arrived. Maggie expressed her sister's eagerness to see her and stated that their mother had called, sounding sober and inquiring about Maggie. I suggested she call her mother, but Maggie claimed she was not ready yet, perhaps in a few days. Maggie inquired once we had resumed our journey, "You have heard my story. How about yours?" I filled her in. "Your dad and brother. And you did nothing to them? What did your wife have to say about it?" I did not ask her. I've just departed. Perhaps she was pushed or blackmailed. She was not forced. I could tell by her emotions as I took the photos. If she was being blackmailed, she could have informed me, and we could have worked something out. I still think you should figure out why, perhaps someday, but I'm not prepared for that right now. We stopped at a Days Inn, where I reserved a room with 2 beds, but Maggie did not want to be alone. After her shower, she crawled into bed with me. She touched me, and her hand started moving down my body. I grabbed her wrist and whispered, "No, but I want to. I owe you." "No, you do not owe me anything. I will not take advantage of you. You were in a difficult situation and desperate when you made that offer. I was just happy to help. I am not doing this to repay you. I want to do it just because I want to. Is this okay? I am no saint." Maggie was also appealing because I no longer felt attached to Sonia. I let go of Maggie's wrist. She interpreted that as a yes, and we both loved it. We stopped for a quick bite to eat before continuing our drive to Houston, which would be beyond midnight. Instead of arriving at her sister's house at 2 a.m., I opted to call it a night about 9, when I did not get out of my car. She asked if I was coming in. I liked her but didn't see any future for us. I claimed I wanted to, but I couldn't. I'm behind schedule and need to get moving." She looked disappointed but gave me a kiss goodbye. He thanked me before exiting. I saw her walk inside. I got into a motel and ate at IHOP. Thinking about what to do next, I decided to go to the Alamo in San Antonio, which is about 3 hours from Houston. Half an hour outside Columbus, I noticed a car pulled over with a man and a lady hitching. I came to assist the man, Ray, in the front seat and the woman, Sarah, in the back. After a short distance, Ray drew a switchblade on me, demanding my money and car. I grabbed for the .45 in the door pocket and said, "I don't think so." Before I could use it, Sarah suffocated Ray with her purse straps. He dropped the knife and struggled, but the grip was too strong. I returned the call, turned down a rural road, and pulled over. I grabbed the knife, got out, and opened the passenger door. I told Sarah to let him go, and she grabbed her pocketbook. Ray, already unconscious, sank forward. I dragged him outside and left him on the ground. I checked Ray's pulse and discovered he was still alive. I stripped him down, rolled him into the ditch beside the road, and threw his clothes into the car's trunk. I then asked Sarah if she would like to sit in the front seat. "You are not going to leave me here?" she asked. "Why should I do that?" "I am not sure. Possibly because I was with him. Even if you were, you assisted me. So why should I abandon you?" She shrugged and moved in front of me. I made a U-turn, turned left at the corner, and we drove towards San Antonio. When we were driving, I asked, "So you were not involved with him?" I had only known him for approximately an hour. My car broke down, so he stopped and offered me a ride. He turned out to be a jerk who believed I should repay him with closeness. I intended to accompany him until he stopped for food or gas, at which point I would depart, when he started to threaten me. I realized I needed to act, so I utilized the purse straps an hour ago. "Why didn't he drop you off at Waverly? So could you arrange for a tow and repair for your vehicle?" It was not my car, and I didn't really care what happened to it. I cocked an eyebrow at that, and she clarified that it was my husband's corporate car. "I am sure he has reported it stolen or will soon. My goal was to leave it at the San Antonio airport before flying to San Diego," she said, having seen my reaction. I should probably tell the entire story. I caught my husband cheating on me in order to punish him. I slept with his brother and informed him about it. I told him we were even, and he could either stop cheating or I would keep hooking up with guys whenever he did. He called me a 403 and said it was okay for men to cheat but not married women. Did he really say that? He stated that men are programmed to reproduce, but women are programmed to stay at home and care for their families. He used the phrase, nature. Then he told me he was going because he couldn't live with a 403. That night, after he had fallen asleep, I snatched the car keys and fled. I spent the night at a motel, went to the bank when it opened and drained my accounts. After that, I drove till my car broke down. So here I am. I laughed aloud. What's so funny? I'm just chuckling about the coincidence. It almost feels like we're in the same scenario. How do you calculate? I told her how I got on the road and picked her up. Oh my goodness, what are the chances? I suppose you won't be reconciling with her? Not a chance. She explained her family in San Diego and her intention to stay with them until she could get back on her feet. When I inquired if she was in a hurry to get there, she responded just getting there was important. I mentioned my plans to visit the Alamo in San Antonio and recommended we drive to San Diego together, as I'd never been there. She agreed, and we went to the Alamo on the Riverwalk before purchasing a road atlas to plan our trip to San Diego. The trip would take around 2.5 days. We decided to leave the next morning and find a motel for the night. I inquired if she liked separate rooms or twin beds. She jokingly suggested one room with one bed, hoping to get even with her soon-to-be ex. I agreed and smiled. It took us 6 days to drive 1,500 miles to San Diego. We arrived around 6 p.m. On a Saturday, I inquired for her address. Not tonight, she replied. I'd like to spend one more night with you before you leave. I shall phone my mother and inform her that I will coming tomorrow. She looked at me and inquired, Have you ever had a woman from behind? I have never tried it. My husband, Bert, always wanted to, but I thought it was too disgusting. I want to try it right now. Why now? What caused you to change your mind? I want to give you something that I never gave Bert, and I'm sure I'll tell him later how much I appreciated it. Have you considered the idea that you may not like it? Maybe I won't, but I'm not going to tell him that. It turned out that she enjoyed it and wanted to do it again. It was 6 o'clock when we got at her mother's place. She glanced at me with a sad smile and said, "I'd like to invite you in, but it's too awkward right now." When I called Mom, she said Bert was here. He seemed to be pleading with me to accept him back. Are you going to? I am not sure. I love him. I had adored him since 6th grade. I left because he claimed he couldn't live with the 403 and was divorcing me. If you like, I can stay in the car. Honestly, it's tempting, but what happened to me is still too recent for me to make such a decision. She handed me a piece of paper with her phone number on it in case you wanted to call me. She kissed me passionately and got out of the car. I was tempted to call her back, but I opted not to, and drove away. I got into a motel and headed to the village next door for a supper. After dining, I returned to my motel room and decided to call my mother to let her know I was fine. It rang 4 times before someone answered. Hello? It was my father's voice, so I hung up. I was perplexed and wondered what was happening. Mom stated she kicked him out. I called Cindy on a whim. Hello? Hello, Cindy, I'm Bob. Bob, where are you? I am in Dawson, Georgia. I'm phoning to get an update on what's happening back home. I tried calling Mom, but my father answered. She had kicked him out, the last I heard. She did what? Your father wanted to retrieve his belongings from the home and garage, so Mom offered him the weekend to do so. She's currently residing with your Aunt Mildred. How is everything going with you? I hired an attorney and filed for divorce. Dave stated he would fight it, but I advised him to go ahead and spend his money. I told him he could delay it, but not stop it. Did you know he and your dad moved in with Sonia after your mother and I kicked him out? I didn't know, and I don't care. They're all trash and deserve one another. Exactly. When are you coming back? I am not. I don't think I'd enjoy being in jail. Why are you saying that? I am sure it is illegal to shoot someone even if it does not kill them. Why do you believe that? Because I did this to David. No, you did not. Yes, I did. Your father and Dave told the cops it was an accident. They claimed Dave inadvertently shot himself while attempting to show Sonia how to use the .380 pistol you purchased for her protection while you were away. How did they get away with it? Your father took the tool outside, fired into the ground, and then carried it and the spent shell back inside, dropping them near where Dave had fallen. And the police believe this? Yes, they did. How about the tires? I destroyed my father's automobile. I doubt the police were aware of this. Why would they do anything like that? Your father stated that the business could not manage the scandal. Dave was unhappy about it and wanted to blame you. But your father wouldn't let him. I am still not coming back, at least not for a while. If I did, I'd undoubtedly run into my father and David, and I'd want to hurt them severely. You still have to come back. Rob, your mom needs you. She needs assistance with the business. She doesn't need me. She has David. David is useless now that your father isn't around to cover for him. He clearly cannot do anything, but I think you already knew she was correct. I knew David was worthless, but he was family, and it was my father's company. If my father doesn't care, why should I? I asked her how she was doing. Is everything okay? She answered. That is a ridiculous question. You understand how I am. You're probably struggling with the same issues I am. I apologized for dumping all this on you. I am actually delighted you did. We were discussing having a baby. If I had a child and then discovered what Dave was doing, I'd wind myself a single mother. You rescued me from that. I told her I will keep in touch. And after I hung up, I pondered about what she had said. It did not fit what I had heard from my mother. Sonia was frantic to talk to me, according to Mom, and she almost killed herself in the process. Cindy's version was different. How could she be so frantic to reach me while allowing those two losers to move in with her? I shake my head. Unbelievable. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of people shouting outside. I witnessed a man shove a woman to the ground before racing away. I walked outside to assist her, and she stated that she had nowhere to go because they had already checked out and she had just $40 left. I offered her to wait in my room, but she said she was in serious danger and had no method of getting home to St. Paul, Minnesota. Realizing I could help, I told her I was going to Minneapolis and offered her a ride. She was first apprehensive and questioned my intentions. I calmed her by proposing that she take my driver's license and license plate information and give it to someone for safety. She inquired whether I was going to make any moves on her, and I swore not to pursue her, but would not resist if she made one. She agreed, and we made a pinky swear as we prepared to leave. She stated that her name was Mary. She was 31, married, and had no children. She worked as an office manager for a law firm in St. Paul. Was it your hubby who left you? Yes, it was before we went out. Are you certain he won't come back for you? His final words to me were, "Screw you. Even if he comes back, I'm pleased to be leaving. One of the benefits of working for the law company is a discount on legal services. I'll talk to them about divorce as soon as I get back." I was curious, but I chose not to inquire. I imagined I'd learn all about it on the long drive. The map indicated that it was around 2,000 miles. Then, of course, she wanted to hear my story, which I shared. Interestingly, her reaction was similar to Sarah's. "And you did not kill your father or brother. I didn't believe it was worth going to prison or receiving the death penalty for it. That makes sense. You are going to divorce her, correct?" "I haven't decided yet." "Are you serious about getting back with her?" "Oh no, definitely not. I can't decide whether to get a divorce or just walk away. She'll eventually want a divorce, so I might as well let her handle it. In the meanwhile, I will not pay alimony or divide anything with her." We had finished our meals at that point. I paid the bill, and we drove away. When we got on the freeway, I asked whether she was in a hurry to get home. "Why are you asking? It might alter how I drive. I normally drive around 700 miles each day at an average speed of 70 miles per hour. That equals around 10 hours of driving per day. We'd need 3 days to cover the over 2,000-mile distance. If you need to be home sooner, I will have to drive faster." She paused for a bit before saying, 3 days works for me. 4 or 5 would be fine too." Mary took out a book and began reading, while I hummed along to the oldies on the radio, thinking about what I'd need to do when I got home. After 2 hours, she set down her book and began telling her story. She explained that during a trip to Mexico, she became very inebriated and witnessed her husband Jake's intimacy with Nancy. Unsure whether it was genuine or a drunken dream, she remained silent until the morning when they were leaving. When she confronted Jake about his infidelity, he became combative, blaming her and saying Nancy wasn't the first. Jake left her at the motel after she discussed consulting a lawyer. We stopped for the night, and I asked if she wanted separate rooms. She said no. She trusted me. The room contained twin beds. After her shower, I was already in bed and promptly fell asleep after saying goodnight. The next morning, we ate breakfast and began the road. During stops, we discussed our plans for our spouses. She was intent on divorcing. I was still unsure. That night, I got another room with twin beds, as previously. I was in bed when she emerged from the restroom. She begged to sleep with me so she could be held and cuddled. I hesitated but agreed. She climbed in and, although feeling my firm tools, did not move away. I managed to maintain discipline. The next morning, she was surprised by my restraint, and I admitted that I didn't believe I could do it either. We arrived in St. Paul at 5:30 that afternoon. She guided me to a Best Western, indicating that she needed what she didn't obtain the night before. She was astonished I hadn't moved when she climbed into bed naked, but now she was coming on to me, and I told her I wouldn't go away. I still didn't understand why her husband cheated on her, but it wasn't because she was bad in bed. When I asked if she wanted to go home, she answered, "No, I'm going to sleep next to you tonight, and in the morning I'll try for one more." She cuddled close to me, and we fell asleep. She reached for the door and said, "Come in." I do not think I should. Why not? I'm not good at confrontations. Confrontations with your husband? Oh no, this is my sister's home. Jake will not be here. My sister can't stand him, and he knows it. I went inside with Mary to meet her sister Julia, Julia's daughter, and her daughter's boyfriend. Mary described what happened in Mexico and San Diego, and Julia expressed her distaste for Jake. When the subject got to me, Mary encouraged me to tell my tale. They were sympathetic, and Julia inquired whether I was returning to Michigan. I said I hadn't decided yet. Julia stated that her daughter Jess and her boyfriend Mike were heading to the University of Michigan, and that I might help them save money on flying by providing them a ride. I decided to help and inquired as to when they intended to leave. Mary and I lingered for another hour before leaving in the car. Mary suggested I book a motel room and guaranteed I wouldn't be alone. I checked into a nearby motel, acquired 2 keys, handed one to Mary, and drove her home. A knock came at the door later that evening. I opened it and found Julia. "Can I come inside?" she asked. I allowed her in, and she spoke. "Mary told me absolutely everything regarding your trip." I was puzzled about what she meant, and as I pondered it, she began to elaborate. "My husband died 9 months ago, and I've been struggling because I desperately need to be close. I've had to pretend I'm still in sorrow, since people expect me to be down for at least a year. But you are a stranger here. Nobody knows you, and you'll be gone the day after tomorrow. If Mary is correct about you, I thought you might be able to help me. She was at least 15 years older than me, but she remained gorgeous. I did not owe Sonia any allegiance. I went for Julia. I drew her close, kissed her, and we began removing each other's clothes. About 20 minutes later, I heard someone unlock the door, and Mary entered. Julia promised she'd leave plenty for me. Did she? With a little help, I'm confident I can rise to the occasion. Do not worry, Mary knows just what to do, and she did. I need to begin working on my divorce. If I join you in the shower, I could wind up staying in this room all day. As she dressed, she inquired about my plans for the day. I told her I'd probably stay in the hotel, relax, and read a book I had brought with me but hadn't started. She must have informed Julia, since I was only halfway through the first chapter when someone knocked on the door. I opened it and found Julia smiling. "Can I come inside?" I stood aside, and she strolled right in, began to undress. "I realize I'm taking advantage of you, but you'll be departing tomorrow, so I need to make the most of it." Mary said she didn't mind if I joined in. "You don't mind, right?" Looking at her beautiful physique, I realized I didn't mind at all. We spent a wonderful morning together, and around noon, she stated she needed to leave. I promised Mary that I wouldn't use it all up before she left. We planned for me to pick up the kids the next day. As she kissed me goodbye, she spoke. "I wouldn't be angry if you decided to return here to live. In a few months, I will be ready to start dating. Who knows? I have yet to find out what I want to do with my life. Or I might return." Mary arrived about 4 p.m. and asked the same inquiry she had earlier. Did she leave me enough? She had, but only barely. Mary hugged me and said, "I'm glad you're leaving today, but not in a bad way. After Jake is served, I must stay absolutely above board so that he cannot use anything against me. If you were here, I would be too tempted." She kissed me farewell and then departed. I checked my watch and realized I had time to call home before picking up the kids from Julius. "Good morning, and thank you for contacting Dawson and Sons. How can I help you?" "Morning, Glenda. Is my mother around?" "Bobby." "Even if she wasn't, I've been directed to put you in touch with her immediately. If you make a call, please state you're returning home. Or I might be, but it's not confirmed yet." Mom answered, I'll get your mom 2 rings later. Bobby, where are you? St. Paul. Where? St. Paul, Minnesota. What are you doing there? Getting ready to return home. Thank goodness. I need you to help me keep this place functioning. I said I'd be back, but it doesn't necessarily imply I'll be returning to work. Damn it, Robert. I need you here. How will you keep me and David apart if I wind up in the same room with him? I'll be unable to stop myself from confronting him. You don't have to worry about it. I found him stealing from the company. Even though he is my son, I had to fire him. I didn't know how to react, so there was a brief pause as I considered what to say next. This is also true for me. I stole $115,000 from the company before leaving. I didn't perceive it as theft, however. My father had pushed me to accept severance pay. How's that terrible piece of work going? You're chatting to me over the phone. I guess you're not in jail for sending him. I have no idea where he is, and I don't care enough to find out. Sonia kicked him inside. Your brother is out. You knew they had moved in with her, right? Cindy told me about it when I last spoke with her. I'm not sure why she kicked them out, but I really don't care. We can sort out the money you took later. For the time being, we will take it as an advance on your earnings when you return. You could need to repay some of it. I wasn't concerned about it because I hadn't spent much of the money. I was still using what I had taken from our bank account before leaving. I assured Mom I'd see her in a few days and headed to Julia's to pick up my passengers for the trip to Ann Arbor. Julia greeted me cordially with an embrace, then hugged and kissed Jessica, encouraging her to behave and obtain high marks. I helped Jessica bring her things to the car and inquired about Mike's arrival time or whether we were picking him up. Mike is not coming. We broke up last night when I discovered he was seeing Abby Fisk. I'm not typically insensitive, but given my recent experiences, my initial thought when I realized I'd be alone with this lovely 19-year-old was fantastic. Another opportunity for me. But by the time we reached Interstate 94, I had put that thought aside. We spoke, and I found she was attending the University of Michigan on scholarship, studying pre-law with intentions to enter law school. I asked her to choose a radio station, but she opted to read and selected a book from her bag. I discovered a station playing country and bluegrass music and hummed and sang along to several of the tunes. We'd been driving for approximately 4 hours when she asked where we'd stop for the night. There is no need to quit. It's just 600 kilometers. We should arrive around 8, but I want to stop. I do not have to check into the dorms until the day after tomorrow. Additionally, you must check in before 6 p.m. And you mentioned we wouldn't arrive until 8, so I'd need a place to stay overnight anyway. A few minutes later, she continued, I'd like to see for myself. See, I overheard Mom and Aunt Mary chatting, and I want to know if what they said is real. What were they saying? That you're fantastic in bed and very excellent at pleasing women. You cannot be serious. I am. My only experiences were with boys my age who had no idea what they were doing and lacked the abilities Mom and Aunt Mary mentioned. Have you got any odd interests? Have you ever dreamed about being with a mother and daughter or an entire family of women? It's now just my mother, Aunt Mary, and I left. I saw you have a darker side. What makes you believe that? Because you are interested in a man who has been with your mother and aunt. She smiled. You caught on. I am not sure I can manage the pressure, I confessed. You seem to be expecting a superstar, and I'm not sure I reach that standard. My mother raved about you to Aunt Mary, which is good enough for me. Furthermore, given your experience, you must be far superior to the 3 I've previously worked with. My first experience was dreadful. After the senior prom, which was a week after my 18th birthday, I let my prom date coax me into going. He climbed on, completed it in about a minute and a half, and then got off and exclaimed, "Wasn't that great?" I was quite hurt and wanted to stop things with him. You need to be better than that. I certainly hope so. Once in the room, I undressed first, followed by her. I pulled out, and she spun around, dropped onto the bed, looked up at me, and said, "Thank you. I am delighted you convinced me to do it." Can we try it again? We could and did. We stayed in that room, going out to lunch only an hour before her dorm check-in time. I assisted her in carrying her bags inside. She gave me her cell phone number, kissed me, and warned me not to be a stranger. I am going to need you. You have pampered me. Boys my age will never measure up after you. After one final passionate kiss, I left the dorm feeling like $1,000,000 since you had spoilt me. Echoing in my head. Take that. Sonia. It was a short trip from Ann Arbor to Ypsilanti. I got into a motel and scheduled a wake-up call for the morning. I stopped for breakfast and got at Dawson & Sons, just before the doors opened at 8 a.m. I still had the keys and could have let myself in, but it didn't seem right. I could have knocked till someone came, but honestly, I wasn't looking forward to facing whatever awaited me. When George, the security guard, unlocked the door at 8 o'clock, he welcomed me with a welcome return. Glenda sprang up from behind the reception counter, ran over and hugged me. She kissed my cheek and murmured, "Thank God you are back. Maybe we can figure things out now. Is Mom present in her office?" When I came into Mom's office, she looked up and said, "It is about time you showed up. There is a large stack of paperwork on your desk that need your immediate attention. I haven't decided whether I'll stay." "Nonsense. You should be here. Running away is not a solution to your difficulties. You are needed here. So here's where you should be. Now, get to work. We can discuss during lunch." She was correct, so I chose not to fight it. It wasn't a foot tall, but it was a large heap, so I began sorting through it. Around 12:30, Mom arrived and announced that it was time for lunch. We went to Pegasus after having ordered. Mom asked if I had returned home yet. I told her no. I stayed in a motel last night. "Why didn't you go home?" "Because Sonia is there. You're going to have to confront her someday. Why not do it now? Why are you so keen to engage with her, given what she did to your husband? You should want her to suffer, but now you're afraid about her injuring herself and pressuring me to get connected with someone I'd like to strangle. It may not make sense to you, but I want Robbie back, and it won't happen unless you clean up this mess. To accomplish this, you must first obtain answers to your inquiries." "Which questions?" "So, why did she do it? What may I have done to create this? How long was it going on? Where?" "Your father and brother. The only ones. There might be more questions, but you need to answer them before moving on." I knew she was correct, but despite my questions, did I truly want to find the answers? Was it because I didn't satisfy Sonia in bed? My interactions with Maggie, Mary, Julia, and Jess made me believe I was really decent. But why was I with Sonia, and who else but my father and brother? I went back to work and made significant progress on the stack of papers. At 5:30, I left work and got into my car. As I approached the exit and paused to see if it was clear, I considered whether to proceed to the motel or home. I took a deep breath before turning left. Sonia's car was in the garage, so I knew she was at home. I sat in my car, staring at the house, trying to muster the bravery to enter. Finally, I told myself, just do it. Bob and I stepped out and walked up the front steps. I reached for the door handle. The door opened and Sonia stood there. She quickly threw herself at me, crying. "You're okay." "Thank God you are okay." While gripping me fiercely, I was caught aback by her reaction and stood there for a time before shaking it off and pushing her away. As I approached her, I walked past her and into the house. She followed me, crying. "Why did you push me away?" "I love you." I turned to face her. "Do you adore me? But you slept with both my father and brother. I cannot imagine what you would do if you despised me. You do not comprehend. I had to do it. You had to do it. I need to hear this. Go sit at the kitchen table while I make myself a big drink. I will need it to deal with whatever bullshit you are about to throw at me, with the jack on the rocks at hand." I joined her at the table. I sat down and stated I didn't want to be here, but Mom persuaded me I needed to face you. I took a sip of my drink and said, "Go ahead, Sonia, tell me. Do you remember Karen's birthday party? Which one did you miss since you were out of town? I recall you telling me to leave. Even though you couldn't, I went. Cindy was at her ailing mother's house, so Dave was alone. When he saw I was alone, he began following me around. He agreed to be my watchdog for the night. He wasn't particularly adept at it. Is someone there? Probably. Dave realized I was alone and drugged one of my drinks with some date rape pills. My watchdog did not witness what happened, but he saw I was disoriented and suspected something was wrong. Dave assumed it was Kyle Barger because he had seen Kyle hanging around me a lot. Dave got me out of there and drove me home. I'm not sure whether that's how it went, because I was really out of it by that point. I only know what Dave told me the following day. When he got me home, he removed my clothing and put me to bed. He then stripped and climbed in with me. He claimed he couldn't resist. He had always wanted me and saw an opportunity to accomplish it without my knowledge. I'd wake up the next morning with a vague understanding of what had happened, but no distinct memory of how or who did it. I later discovered that date rape medications affect your body differently than your head, even if your brain is out of sync. Your body's senses remain functioning as you recover from the effects of the drugs. You're already immersed in the act and experiencing everything intensely, just like you would with a real performance. You know how I become utterly unfettered when I'm getting close to or at a peak? That is where I was when I regained consciousness. I was lying there begging for more intensity and speed without understanding it was David. That's when your father showed up. He was making his regular check-in on me while you were abroad. He stepped in, saw what was going on, and began taking photos with his phone. I had no idea he was there. He took many shots and climbed into bed with me after Dave finished and left. Your father took his seat when your father had done. Dave was ready again and took command. It wasn't until Dave's second spin that I realized who was with me, but by then I was so out of it that who it was didn't matter as long as I got off. I'm not sure how many times they got close to me before getting dressed and leaving, but it exhausted me and made me fall asleep. That afternoon, Dave approached me and begged me not to tell you or Cindy what he had done while he was there. Your father arrived and announced that he will be back for more. When I urged him to leave, he chuckled and showed me the photos he had captured. He claimed if I treated him correctly, you wouldn't see those images. I couldn't let you see them because they didn't depict anyone being coerced. They showed a woman who seemed to enjoy intimacy. I then thought I should have instructed both of them to go and hoped you would believe me. But it's simple to say in retrospect. How many times has this happened? Every time you took a trip. I glanced at her for a few seconds before speaking. Karen's birthday celebration was 7 months ago, and I've gone on a dozen vacations since then. I counted mentally and said more than half a dozen. I've been away on 9 excursions, including one for Karen's birthday. When she averted her gaze, I realized what had happened. I am not sure how, but I knew. That is ridiculous. Sonia, you continued doing it because you enjoyed it. You wouldn't let me do it because you found it nasty. But you enjoyed it and did not want it to end. That is why you did not come to me and explain what happened. I hoped I'd believe you. She gazed at me with an emotion I'd never seen before, saying, "No, I didn't just like it, I loved it. I wanted more than what I was getting, but I couldn't take the chance while you were around. I honestly believed that if I just did it while you were away, you would never find out. I really enjoyed it, but I love you and do not want to lose you. Were David and my father the only ones? No. Your father took 3 other males with him 3 times. Wow. This is just getting worse. You participated in a group act. You've slept with 9 different males. I bet you enjoyed it as well. I did, and there weren't 9 different guys. It was always the same 3. Do I know any of them? Are there folks I see daily who are secretly laughing at me? No, I believe they were only customers. Your father was entertaining. I don't understand, Sonia. You claim to love me, but you did this to me for 7 months. My father and brother would laugh behind my back whenever they saw me. They were making a fool of me and leaving me with the consequences. I know every one of our consumers. That means 3 of the men I work with are probably smirking inside as they shake my hand. You still love me, and you can do this. You could have told me that I wasn't satisfying you in bed, and I could have worked to better. There is nothing wrong with you. You always make me feel good. It is about how frequently we can do it, not how effectively you complete and require a rest. But I can go for a long time. Consider it this way. Place 5 men and 1 woman in one room, and 5 women and 1 man in another. After 20 minutes, you'd find 1 guy performing in the first room, 1 waiting for his turn, and 3 others preparing to perform in the second. You'd notice 5 women waiting for the guy to get erect again. It's simply how we're formed. There was no romance or affection involved. I don't even like your father and brother anymore. I believe they're both jerks. They are jerks. But you allow them to live with you. They had nowhere else to go. And I felt partially responsible for their circumstances. I could have stopped it after the first time, but I did not. I let it continue. And that is how we got caught. I told them there would be none of this once they moved in. I wasn't sure if I could get you back, but I knew I wouldn't stand a chance if I kept going with them. They tried to get me intoxicated one night in order to take advantage of me, but I discovered their scheme and forced them to leave. It took me placing a call to your father to get them to go. You honestly think I'd want to come back after seeing what was going on and knowing the facts? I still had hope. I understand that people see things differently, but aside from the shock of finding out, did it actually harm you? You received all the love and affection you desired. I have never said no to you, and most of the time, I was the one chasing you. That is not true. True. You've turned me down many times. When did I do that? Each time. I wanted to try from behind. You declined, but my father was fine with it. I did not give it to him. He and Dave took it the night I was drugged, and I discovered that I genuinely liked it. You never received it because you never asked for it. After I realized I loved it, I considered suggesting it, but I opted against it because I'd previously declined so many times. I did not want you to believe I was simply interested or suspicious. I figured I would wait until you asked again before agreeing to try it, but you never asked. She stopped for a bit before saying, "Since we're talking about it, perhaps it would be a great welcome home gift." Maybe if I were returning home, but that's unlikely. Her face dropped as she asked, "Why not? Why would I stick with someone I know I can't satisfy? Or why would I stay with someone who always wants or requires several partners?" I never said that. You've always satisfied me. Always. I don't require anything more than what you can provide. Yes, I learned that I enjoyed it, but I don't need it. All I need is you. Even if you want to get back at me, find someone else. But please get back to me. I pondered about my adventures and decided to keep quiet. I admit I was tempted by her offer, but I never took it. Just then, the front door banged open and my brother David staggered into the room with a cane. He held a Colt in his other hand. "I've been waiting for you to return, you jerk. I'm going to take out both of your knees and see how you like it. I am your blood, for crying out loud. How could you do this to me? What did you expect to win a medal for? Sleeping with my wife?" "I should have just finished you," he muttered, pointing the tool at my knees. "No," Sonia shouted and threw herself between me and David just as he shot. I am not sure who was more shocked. It was either David or me, but I reacted first. I tackled him. He dropped the tool, and I punched him in the face 3 times, knocking him to the ground. I grabbed the Colt and struck him in the head with it. Then he turned to Sonia, who was bleeding on the floor. I dialed emergency and dashed into the kitchen for a towel. I knelt alongside her and tried to stop the bleeding. She gazed up at me and said, "Don't leave me. Please do not abandon me." The EMTs and police arrived and they requested another ambulance for David. I believe I had been too tough. David continued waking up while I was attempting to assist Sonia, so I had to beat him again with the instrument to keep him down. I believe I hit him 6 times. It was a close call. A bleeding wife on the floor, a messed-up sibling, and me standing uninjured. I spent an hour speaking with the police, but they accepted my account of events. It helped that I had captured everything on my phone as I reached the front steps. They had just left when I received the call. Sonia died in the ambulance on her way to the hospital. I was devastated. Sonia's acts demonstrated how much she truly cared for me. I would probably know if she had survived. I almost likely would have given our marriage another opportunity. The entire episode hit the news, and about a week later I returned home from work to find Jess waiting for me on the front porch steps. She stood up and gave me a hug. "How are you holding up?" "Just barely. What brought you here?" "I witnessed what Mom went through after losing Dad. She wanted something to grasp onto. I figured you might need someone right now, too. We had something truly amazing, so I thought I could pitch in and help." It lasted 5 months before she informed me it was finished. She'd met someone new, had a strong connection, and realized she needed to move on. David's trial did not begin until over 8 months later. He tried to claim it was an accident and that he never intended to harm anyone. But no one believed him, and he was sentenced to 20 years to life. Cindy called me on the day of his sentencing and asked for a favor. She asked me to sleep with her so she could tell David. Cindy was lovely, and I saw no reason not to aid her. She exhausted me, and the following day she went to see David during visiting hours and informed him what she had done. She did not get the reception she expected. Instead of being enraged and shouting at her, he simply sat there and cried. A week later, she returned to see me. I could use a pal with perks. "Do you know somebody who may be interested?" We remained involved for another 4 months, but she received a promotion at work and relocated to Dallas. I was quite sorry to see her go. I considered going with her, but she talked me out of it. "I like you, Rob. I really like you, but I don't love you. I need to find someone I love who also loves me. I'm starting a new life in Dallas and hoping to find all I need." There. My father tried multiple times to contact me, but I refused to speak with him when he died of a stroke. I attended his funeral and created a scene in front of maybe 15 people. I urinated in his grave as they lowered the casket. Talking to my mother, I learned the names of 3 clients who were quite close to my father. They might not have been the same ones he brought to meet Sonia, and I may never know, but I decided they were the ones and made them pay in my own way. I didn't damage them physically, but I did screw with them. They were still customers, so I approached them through the business. They ended up paying between $2 and $0.04 more per unit than other consumers, and they never received the same quantity discounts. It wasn't much of a revenge, but I felt compelled to act. I understand it was unfair to target them without being certain they were participating. It could have been my imagination, but sometimes I believed I noticed a sneer on their features. Still, I'm human, and like most people, I felt compelled to retaliate, even if I was wrong. My mental condition was improved by having done something rather than nothing. Let karma do the rest. There was one unexpected conclusion to all of this. 10 months after returning home, I was sitting at home reading the New York Times' finance section when my cell phone rang or said hello. Roberts. Maggie. "Do you remember me?" "I do. My sister saved your phone number from when I called her. My sister urged that I call you. Believe me, I didn't want to, but she believes you have the right to know. You know what? Your father. You have twin sons. Are you serious?" "Yes, I am serious. You are the only man I have ever been with." There was a little silence before she stated, "I'm not asking for anything. I simply called because Chris insisted it was the correct thing to do." 36 hours later, I was knocking on the door of a Houston home, ready to begin a new chapter in my life. Here's the next story. I slipped my keys inside the front door. An uncomfortable feeling came over me. The house felt strange. There was something in the atmosphere. I received unwanted attention in my own home. That night was meant to be just another regular Wednesday. I'd finished work early and planned to surprise Emma. But what I discovered in my own living room was far from typical. I walked in and found Emma on the couch, but she wasn't alone. Sitting next to her was a man I'd never seen. He sat back, his feet put up on my coffee table, as if he owned the space. Part of me hoped it was simply a friend, or even a coworker. However, something in my gut told me otherwise. "Hello, babe," I welcomed, hiding the gnawing mistrust in my voice and attempting to appear casual, but she hardly looked up. Her smile was too tight, and her eyes did not meet mine. That was my first clear indication that everything was about to unravel. The guy, let's call him Todd, had the audacity to extend his hand, flashing a smug grin that said arrogance. He didn't stand up or even flinch. He just stared at me with those dead eyes. Every inch of my body wanted me to walk up and wipe that smirk off his face. But I held back. If only I could get my facts straight before allowing my emotions take over. "Who is this?" I inquired, almost hanging on to the final threads of my tolerance. Emma's laughter sounded forced. "Oh, is that him? He's only a friend." Her voice had the high-pitched quality of a poor lie. I had been with this woman for 10 years. I recognized every quirk, smile, every bluffing indication she made. Right now, her poker mask was falling quickly. "Oh yes," I repeated, "just a friend," allowing the words to hang in the air. There was no way a friend would be sitting so comfortably. Not in my house, not staring at me with that arrogant expression. The room fell silent. Finally. Todd chuckled, a low sound that just fueled the fire raging inside me. Emma shuffled uneasily, fumbling with her phone, as if wanting to distract me. I could see it in her eyes, however. She felt cornered and had no idea how to get out of this one. Then she did something that shocked me. She genuinely rolled her eyes. "Can you relax, Mike? You're always really paranoid." Her tone was frigid, a direct slap in the face. My own wife looked at me as if I was crazy, as if I were overreacting to the stranger in our living room. She continued by waving her hand dismissively. "Todd and I simply like spending time together. You're exaggerating the situation. Is this a crime?" The audacity was astonishing. My pulse beat as I glanced at her, attempting to process what she had just spoken. Was she really encouraging me to relax while some guy sat spread out in my living room like he belonged there? I clenched my fists, trying to keep my wrath under control. Nonetheless, I attempted to give her one last out. "Emma, are you really assuring me that this is just a nice visit?" She groaned and rubbed her temples, as if she were already bored of the topic. "Mike, it's as if you no longer know me." Her lips curved into a grin that went deeper than words could. That was it. I was not going to stand here and let her dismiss this as if it were nothing. But I knew better than to lose it. I needed to be smart. I stared Todd directly in the eyes. "Get out of my house now." To my amazement, he did not move. He did not even flinch. Todd merely sat there, crossed his arms, pleased by the whole situation. Emma, the woman I expected to spend the rest of my life with too, remained stationary. Instead, she gave me the same annoyed and dismissive look. "Mike, you are being foolish," she said sarcastically. "Perhaps you should go cool off somewhere? Take a drive, get some air." That was her answer for me to depart. It seemed as if I had fallen into a strange alternative universe. I felt like an outsider in my own house, like a stranger in the life I had worked so hard to create, but I was not going to give them the gratification of seeing me break down. I'm going to see this through with a positive attitude. "Fine," I answered, feeling both angry and determined. "Take grip." But it was far from over, and if they believed I was going to ignore this, they were in for a surprise. I stormed out of the home, my mind a flurry of rage, incredulity, and grim determination. I didn't drive away like I expected. Instead, I walked around the block, letting the crisp night air sharpen my mind. I was not going to be another dumb husband who became a doormat. I have heard the whispers before. I felt an unpleasant distance building between us. But this was beyond anything I could have anticipated. Emma had cast 10 years of trust away, as if it were nothing, bringing some pompous jerk into our home with no second thought. The arrogance, a lack of regard, it was a slap in the face that sent me reeling. After a few minutes, I returned. The house was silent, as if they had both vanished, but I knew they were still present. They had not even bothered to leave. I opened the door and walked inside, feeling a sense of serenity. I didn't feel anything earlier. They both looked up as I arrived. Todd, who was still resting on my couch, looked at me with a smirk, as did Emma. She appeared more frustrated than guilty, as if I were an annoyance rather than her husband. She didn't even try to Z without taking my attention away from them. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass, and took a slow, deliberate sip. I was not about to lose control. Not in front of them. Now, if they wanted to play this game, I would do it better. I finally turned to Todd. You understand. I spoke slowly. You are still here because I am giving you the opportunity to leave before things become unpleasant. Todd raised his eyebrows, evidently unimpressed. I don't think you understand it, Mike. He replied with an arrogant grin. Emma invited me. You don't actually have any say in this. It was nearly laughable. The arrogance. He said it as if he was preparing for the showdown, as if he felt he could simply come in and take over. It was pathetic. But wasn't Emma acting as if I was the outsider, the one who needed to leave? I turned back to Emma. Are you really going to stand there and pretend everything is normal? I asked, my voice low and steady. After everything we've accomplished, the life we've created together, and you do this with him? She rolled her eyes, and in that instant, it was as if she was no longer my wife. Stop being so theatrical, Mike, she scoffed. We were going to inform you eventually, okay? But you've been so preoccupied with work that you didn't notice anything was wrong. I laughed bitterly. So it is my fault now? Todd finally stood up, taking a step closer than was comfortable. Listen, man, he continued, his voice filled with phony pity. I understand that this is difficult for you, but perhaps it's time to confront the reality. She has moved on. You should too. I couldn't believe the audacity. I took a deep breath. Every part of me wants to finish this with a single well-placed punch. But I held back. I had a different plan. I looked at Emma. All right, I replied calmly. If you're truly going on, collect your belongings and leave, both of you. Her face twisted with irritation. Wouldn't you adore that? Simply wash your hands of me and walk away. Mike, I'm not leaving. This house is as much mine as yours. She spoke with such hatred. Her voice was oozing with entitlement. She was daring me to push back, hoping to see if I would actually go through with it. But I was not the one who had broken our vows. I was not the one who had torn us apart. And there was no way I was going to let her destroy what I had achieved and then waltz away as if it were nothing. Fine, I answered, my tone frigid. Want to stay? Stay. But you will not stay with me and Todd. I looked him dead in the eye and stepped closer, so close that he could feel the heat of my rage. Get prepared to pay. You aren't welcome here, and if I see you here again, we'll have a very different chat. Todd's face twisted. I'm losing some of that smirk. Good. It was the first time he appeared genuinely unsure, but Emma only laughed. Oh, seriously? Mike? She crossed her arms and dared me. And what will you do about it? Call a lawyer. Kick me out. Try it. You are pathetic. And there it was, the entire mask off. She wasn't even trying to hide her disgust anymore. This was not the woman I had married. This was somebody else. Someone who viewed me as nothing more than an impediment. I looked between the two of them, took another sip of my drink, then set the glass down. Fine. Stay for as long as you wish. I will be back. I left without slamming the door and without looking back. Let them believe they had won this round. Allow them to feel comfortable. But it wasn't over. Definitely not. If they wanted to act as if this was their home, I'd show them what it required to earn the right to remain. And if they thought I'd just roll over and let them destroy my life, they'd be sorely mistaken. I did not go to a friend's house or a pub to drown my sorrows. No, I needed my mind, sharp and focused. I drove around the neighborhood, allowing my wrath to subside into a quiet, purposeful decision. Emma and Todd believed they had rattled me, that I would be unable to fight back. They could not have been more wrong. I pulled over in a dimly lighted parking lot and got out my phone. If Emma was going to destroy our life together, I'd make sure she had no place in it. This house, our finances, everything. She couldn't just leave with half of it, but I couldn't make any rash decisions. I have to be methodical and calculated. If she wants to go behind my back, I would go right around hers. The first call I made was to Dylan Hunt, a lawyer who specialized in divorce and property law. I knew he would be subtle, which was exactly what I needed. Within minutes, I was setting up a meeting. Dylan didn't know the entire tale yet, but he picked up enough to understand my urgency. "Mike," he said, his voice steady, "do not worry about anything. Just give me the details. I will make sure you are safe." I hung up. I feel the first flicker of control returning. Emma had been so confident that I wouldn't do anything, but she had left herself completely open. I had more possibilities than she understood. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this could be my ticket out of the mess she'd made. The following day, I returned to the house at midday. I half expected them to still be there. Instead, I discovered Emma sitting alone in the living room, browsing through her phone and appearing as relaxed as usual. She barely looked up when I went in. "Returning so soon?" she sneered. "It didn't take you long to chill down." I ignored her and went directly to the master bedroom. I began packing a few things, such as clothes and paperwork, in case I needed to leave the house for an extended period of time. The faster I got out of there, the sooner I could put my plan into action, but I wasn't going to satisfy her by telling her exactly what I was doing. She watched from the doorway. Her smug smile irritated me, and I crossed my arms. "What? Are you leaving simply like that?" she inquired with a tone of worry. "Running away because things got tough." I halted. I looked up at her and smiled. "Don't worry, Emma. I'm only taking what's mine. You've made it apparent that you don't want me around, so I'm making things easy for you." Her sneer faltered for a second, and a shadow of doubt crossed her features. "Mike, you're being ridiculous," she snapped, attempting to regain her composure. "You are overreacting. Do you believe running away will solve anything?" "No, Emma," I said quietly, zipping up my bag, "but it will be a lot easier for me to start anew without you." She narrowed her eyes. My sudden distancing caught them off guard. She wanted me to struggle, demand for information, and possibly even have a theatrical meltdown to feed her sick ego. But to be honest, I stopped caring for her approval the moment I saw her seated there with that other man. I departed without saying anything else. Driving straight to Dylan's office, we met in a small conference room where I lay out everything: the affair, the obvious disdain, and her refusal to leave the house. Everything. Dylan listened silently, nodding and taking notes, indicating that she refuses to leave. He said attentively, "If she's that comfortable in the house, she probably doesn't expect you to kick her out. This is something we can use to your benefit." "How is this so?" I asked. "I am eager to hear about my alternatives." Dylan leaned forwards. "We will begin by securing your valuables. Freeze the accounts so she cannot drain them. Then we will file for exclusive occupancy. If she keeps Todd around, we'll have a great reason to keep her out. And once she has served, she will have no choice but to depart." I nodded, feeling the satisfaction rise throughout me. Dylan's strategy was flawless. He remained calm, ruthless, and focused. Exactly what I needed by my side. "Let's do it," I responded, shaking his hand. "The sooner the better." Dylan completed the paperwork the next day. It was a minor win, but it served to remind me that I was not powerless. Emma may have betrayed me, but I now had the law on my side, and I was not going to let her walk all over me again. I spent the next few days sleeping at a friend's house while waiting for the paperwork to be processed. It felt strange being away from home, but I knew I had to get through it, if I wished to retake my life. And then, on the fourth day, I received the call I had been waiting for. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.